The world has changed a great deal over the last couple of decades. Technology and communications has reduced the globe into a village, a very small village, which makes life very difficult for a dictator. You see, for centuries, tyrants have survived on propaganda, lies, half-truths, and generally hiding what they're really doing from the rest of the world. And this explains why most of the dictators still in power today have clamped down very heavily on social media and the internet. Some have used taxes and licensing, but others have gone as far as arresting and jailing citizens for mere comments on social media that rubbed them up the wrong way. Now, here's my list of 5 of the most destructive dictators in Africa today. Now, my list does not include benevolent dictators or dictators whose economies are improving. And I'm not saying those dictators are good. All dictators are horrible. But in my view, the most destructive are those who do not care for the economies of their country, and especially for the quality of life of their people. And sadly, there is evidence that some of the dictators have no clue as to what they're supposed to do. I know that is amazing, but it is true. So let's get started, and we'll start with number 5. Burundi is a tiny East African country that is also one of the most densely populated countries in the world. And although many say it is resource poor, the country is very conducive for serious agricultural production and even tourism, activities that would bring great wealth to the vast majority of Burundians. Besides, look at what their neighbors have done, the immediate next door neighbors, Rwanda, a country that is also resource poor. But Rwanda is one of the fastest growing economies on the continent. The major obstacle in Burundi is of course a very brutal dictator called Pierre Nkurunziza, the president. He came into power in 2005. He was elected by parliament. And if long-suffering Burundians thought that life was going to be better, they were in for a shock, because things have just gotten worse. And they came to a head in 2015 when he controversially forced himself into a 3rd term, which is against the country's constitution. And then he allowed constitutional reform, and some people thought they'd get breathing space. But when the constitutional reforms were passed, one of the changes legalized his earlier illegality, because now it allowed him to run for president until the year 2034. Interestingly, President Nkurunziza has said that he will not run in next year's presidential elections. The elections are due in 2020. But those who know Africa well know that this means absolutely zero. Our dear continent has a very long history of dictators promising to leave power only to change their minds at the last minute, and to use the dictator's language, due to pressure from the people for them to stay on. Now, fascinatingly, in 2014, this dictator banned jogging. Yep, you heard me correctly. He banned jogging in the city. Reason? He said this was being used by his opponents as an opportunity for subversion, and just to get the message across that he was dead serious. Dozens of opposition figures were jailed for life for jogging. I'm telling you, Africa is full of dark humor. Number 4 is a man who is wanted by the ICC, the International Criminal Court at The Hague, for crimes against humanity. The Sudan president, Omar al Bashir, needs no introduction. He has also announced that he's not running in next year's presidential elections. Yep, presidential elections are due in Sudan next year. But some analysts believe that this could be a crafty way of trying to quell the tempers in the country. You see, there's been civil unrest in Sudan since last year. It seems that the people of Sudan have just had enough of this dictator. Sudan is a country rich in oil resources, but as is typical with this kind of dictators, the vast majority of Sudanese people have not benefited or even felt like they're in an oil-producing country. Now, President John Pombe Magufuli was actually elected into office in 2015. Well, some opposition people disagree. They would actually say he was rigged in. But let us just stick to the official facts. He has performed very well on my list because he has only been in power for a very short time, barely 3 years. And yet the damage he has done in Tanzania would be the envy of any long-serving dictator. What he has done in 3 years has taken some dictators 15 to 20 years to do. I kid you not. Today, foreign investors are an almost extinct species in this East African country. Very, very close to being completely extinct and non-existent. And yet the country has been very heavily dependent on them ever since they reversed years of economic ruin through the failed social economic policies of the founding father of the nation, Julius Kabaraga Nyerere. Nyerere's policies may have failed, but he remains a great African, one of the very, very few to hand over power and retire. At the time he did this, that was unheard of on our continent. Anyway, under Nyerere's supervision, as he handed over power to Ali Hassan Mwinyi, the country opened up its economy. Foreign investors flooded in, and the country saw very high growth. Tanzania was a country that was definitely going places until this crazy, brutal dictator came along. Initially, he got the admiration of many for fighting corruption and for cutting down state expenditure. But as a result of his economic policies, assuming he has one, because many believe he does not. Anyway, as a result of his policies, the country has reversed decades of very rapid progress. One of the poorest countries in the world has gotten a lot poorer under just 3 years of John Pombe Magufuli. Magufuli has shut down free media in Tanzania, jailed opposition leaders. Indeed, the leader of the opposition is currently in jail. Over 400 people have vanished without trace, and some have been killed and their bodies washed up from the Indian Ocean. Late last year, the youngest billionaire in Africa, Mohammed Dewji, was allegedly kidnapped in Dar es Salaam. What followed was a comedy of errors that was not funny at all. Firstly, we were told he was kidnapped by some white people. Seconds after he had been kidnapped, police came out with a statement saying he had been kidnapped by white people, foreigners, whom the government does not want in Tanzania. Then, after his stage-managed release by his alleged kidnappers, we were told that actually it was some South Africans, people speaking with a South African accent. The white people turned into black South Africans. It is widely believed that Bonadeuji was kidnapped in connection to land that the government of John Pombe Magufuli wanted him to surrender. Because they had plans to build a huge hydroelectric dam. The government has since repossessed that land, and indeed it has repossessed land from a lot of private investors and cancelled their titles, which John Pombe Magufuli insists is according to the laws of the country. But then this is a country that allegedly is still interested in attracting foreign investors, because the truth is over 50% of the budget relies on foreign aid. That is why I insinuated earlier that this is a country that does not seem to have a clear economic policy. Because chase away all the foreign investors, you need to have a plan B. You're chasing them away to do what? We don't see the government doing anything. Meanwhile, Tanzanians are suffering, and they're continuing to suffer. The economy is spiraling downwards. And meanwhile, Africa's latest dictator is busy spreading propaganda. People are coming up all the time, naming him the best president in Africa. Which would have been very funny if it wasn't for the very dire straits the people of Tanzania, the ordinary people, find themselves in today as a result of this dictator being in power. The number one position of the most destructive dictator in Africa goes to the largest oil producer in Africa. Very sad. A tiny West African country with a population of only 1.2 million. I'm of course talking about Equatorial Guinea. And its dictatorial leader, Teodoro Obiang Nguema Basogo. 20% of the children in this country die before they reach the age of 5. Yes, it has one of the highest infant mortality rates in the whole world. Quite a contradiction, when you consider that it's in fact the largest producer of oil on the continent. Oh boy, who bewitched Africans? President Basogo has been in power since 1979. That's 40 years. And he has the distinction of being the longest serving president on the continent. And fascinatingly, he overthrew his own uncle in a very bloody coup. And of course had his uncle killed. Now one would think that with a population of only 1.2 million, it's very easy to organize and take a fraction of your oil revenues to improve the lives of the people. Even if you want to steal and embezzle over 80% of it for yourself. But no, this is not the idea that this dictator has. In fact, his firstborn son, Teodoro Obiang, a great music fan of the late Michael Jackson, lives a very lavish lifestyle. Apart from being a world-renowned collector of Michael Jackson stuff, he owns a fleet of cars, and lives the kind of life that would be the envy of even the richest of the richest in the world. And is in line to inherit leadership from his father, which means there's very little hope in the horizon for the people of Equatorial Guinea. So that's my list of the top 5 most destructive dictators on the continent of Africa. I know I must have left out a lot of names of dictators you know and loathe. However, this list was purely based on economic impact on the people. Until next time, this is Chris Kumekucha.